3 o'clock on a Friday, and there's beer somewhere around here, so my apologies for standing between you and the weekend. Really excited about being here and having this time to share with you guys this afternoon. We have a pretty fantastic panel here today. I do notice the panel, the table is quite a bit shorter than yesterday, so not sure what happened there, but here we have Wendy Nather. Wendy Nather is a principal security strategist for DO Security. Chris Burrows is Chief Information Security Officer for Oakland County. We have Jeff Riva, Director of Security Operations for Jackson National Life, and Martin Bally, who is the VP and Chief Security Officer for Diebold Nixdorf in Cleveland, Ohio. So he came all the way up here to hang out with us today. So thanks, Martin. And thanks to all the rest of you. Jeff drove over from GR. Wendy, where do you live?
I live in Austin, Texas.
Wendy came up from Austin, Texas. So she actually gets the prize for being here from the farthest. So, before we get started, my name is Dave Glenn. I'm the VP and Chief Business Development Officer for Creative Breakthrough CBI. We're a cybersecurity consulting company. And one of the things, we're one of the platinum, diamond, whatever sponsors for this, for ConVerge this year, and in the last couple of years. One of the things that I constantly look at and that we constantly fight within our organization is how do we figure out how to fill the knowledge gap? How do we help people being able to not just be great technicians and technologists, but also be able to build those soft skills that help them engage from a consultative perspective with organizations. And it's so important. I was an engineer for 15 years before I came over to the dark side of sales and business development. And one of the things that I always tried to understand is what is my business trying to do, and then try to figure out how technology impacts that. And I think that's the panel that we had yesterday. I think sort of spoke to that, and we're really trying to take this one step further. How do we fill that skills gap and that knowledge gap? One of the interesting statistics that I've heard recently is there are about 65,000 open recs in the United States for requiring CISSPs as one of the credentials. How many active CISSPs do you guys think there are in the U.S.? 73,821 or something like that. 75,321, something like that. Around 75,000. So you got to figure that most of those CISSPs are employed or don't need jobs. So when you think about that, that's an incredible knowledge gap. And the other thing that's happening, Martin, why don't you share with me what you were talking about with China and how they're churning out engineers?
I just want to make sure this works. So I was having a conversation with actually a friend of mine over at Ford, and we're talking about China. Actually, in the next 5 years, they expect the total amount of people that will graduate with an engineering degree in China would exceed the whole population of the United States in the next 5 years. Now, mind you, not in the next 5 years they're going to graduate 330 million. It's going to be current today and plus added on within the next 5 years. So that's kind of what we have to compete against, right, from a cybersecurity perspective.
So it's not just about the knowledge gap. It's about being competitive globally, and we already know that the U.S. has fallen behind from an educational perspective. If we want to continue to be a intellectual leader in a global economy, we really need to be careful that we are paying attention not just to how many people we're graduating and how we're making that happen, but how well we're keeping ahead of things, how well we're keeping track of things. It takes people that like to break things sometimes to build things back up again and to build what we're going to do moving forward. So I think I'm going to start with Wendy. Wendy, when we were talking about questions to ask on this panel, I had a kind of a cool question. I want to start this off with Wendy. What's the worst or weirdest thing you've ever seen somebody do in a job interview?
Oh, this is going to be cool. So somebody showed up to an interview stoned. He was really seriously stoned because my deputy used to work as a drug and alcohol counselor in the U.S. Army, so he knew how to spot these things. He leaned over and said, "Yeah, he's stoned." He also said, we asked him why he was interested in the position, and he said, "Well, so that I have to so many times in a week so that I can keep my unemployment checks coming." And he was very open about that. So we were like, okay, thanks for coming in.
Wow, you got to appreciate someone's dedication for something like that, right? You put a little bit of that into actually working for a living. So what we're going to talk about today, thanks Wendy, what we're going to talk about today is really from two perspectives. From an employer perspective, how do you continue to motivate employees? But I think more importantly for what we're talking about today is how do we grow as employees? How do we grow as people and begin to be better impact both on the companies that we work for, be able to enhance our careers? And something we were just talking about out in the hall, and that is how do we continue to mentor the next generation of people that come behind and do what we do. So, Chris, when you're recruiting, what are some of the key characteristics you look for in an employee or a team member?
So the number one thing is passion to learn. I've just recently built a team from 0 to 4 over the last 2 years. One was a mainframe programmer, one was a help desk manager or help desk analyst. The other was a middleware person who did IIS, and the last one was external to the county and worked on as a help desk manager. None of them had security background, but they all want to learn. They all want to get better. They all had passion to figure out how things are put together and wanted to find out ways of advancing their career. So they all had passion to me, and that was the thing. I could teach them technology, or I could send them somewhere to be taught technology. And since then, the one gentleman who's been only on the team for 2 years has already gone and got 4 certs from SANS, because that was one of the motivating factors was, I will provide you the training to get better on this team. And so all 4 have been receptive. We've done career development plans for them all, but they all showed passion. They all want to get better and learn, because I said, the day you stop learning, the day you're not going to be in information security anymore. That's
right. And arguably, the day you stop learning is the day you start dying, right? Go ahead, Wendy.
So one of the things that we look for, and by the way, we're also hiring a duo. We're hiring a lot, so stop by. One of the things we look for is very specifically empathy. If you can't understand and empathize with what your users or what your customers are trying to do, you're not going to be of any use to them. If you think of security more as a service organization and less as a control organization, you're going to interact a lot better with people, and in return, they're going to interact with you. They're going to come back and say, you know, this didn't really work for me, but I'd really appreciate if you could do this instead. Or if you're a CISO, they'll come back to you and say, I think there's something you ought to know. And that's the most useful thing you can do. So, you know, building those relationships with people and the ability to build relationships, not to run off on your own and go break everything. That's what's most important.
Oh, thank you.
I'll jump on that one too. Absolutely, empathy, and I would say character as well. You know, because if you get members on your team that don't play well with others, you really don't have a team. You have a group, right? You have a bunch of individuals that are doing individual things. Only when you have someone with empathy and character that's going to make the rest of the team around them better, then, you know, the product of whatever it is you're doing, whether it's identity management or SOC operations, it doesn't matter. It's going to be better. And especially, we know that security is high pressure, and having people with a lot of character, you know, and empathy and being able to handle that pressure, you know, is really important, because, you know, those are the instances with senior leadership that are most memorable. And when you have a team that can handle the pressure, you know, you tend to shine.
Oh, thanks, Jeff. And I think sort of a continuation of that, and maybe Martin, you can start on this, and then if the rest of you want to feedback on this at all. One of the things that Chris just talked about that I thought was interesting is that the team that he built those skills within that team. He took people that were very IT savvy to begin with and had passion and were ready to learn, and he helped them build their skills, help mentor them and build their skills up on that. So Martin, when you're hiring or evaluating a team, I know you've done both. You've taken over teams that you didn't build, and you've built teams yourself. What skills and characteristics are most important to you in hiring or recruiting employees?
So so skills from the individuals that I'm looking at?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I would say it depends on the role, right? And I think they touched on those 3 elements that were just discussed are very important. And I think the fourth is really the ability to actually to teach other individuals, right? Because when you're talking about a team, it's about knowledge sharing, right? Because in a team, one individual can't be like the go-to person all the time, right? Because then you're going to have to cover vacations when that person leaves or what have you. And maybe how does that person get advanced, right? So if you think by you being the expert in a certain area, right, you're actually going to pigeonhole yourself because you're going to lock yourself in where you're not going to advance. So I think it's key. We look for individuals that want to share knowledge, that can actually take constructive criticism and learn from it and grow. I think for myself, I'm always hard on myself. I always feel like I can improve. And that drive helps. I do the same thing with my direct reports. They push it down at a certain level, right? We don't want to put too much stress on people, but it's always this continuous improvement cycle, right? And how can we get better? How can we share knowledge? How can we be more optimized? I think that's one of the key things we look for, in a culture fit.
How do you, so anyone else from the panel can answer that, but also, how do you grow those soft skills? Anybody? Grow or mentor that?
Well, one real thing that really works well, I find, is example, leading by example. When you are in an organization where people are looking after each other and asking after each other and saying, how can I help out? It rubs off on you and you start learning that's the type of behavior that gets rewarded. Contrary-wise, if you see some behavior that the company does not want, you better make sure that you're addressing it instead of just kind of letting it go. From a technical skills perspective, I've grown people from no technical background and no security background, all the way into certain branches of security. I had somebody who worked for me as an executive assistant when I was working in the UK, because at my level you were supposed to have an assistant. And I said, she's really too good to be doing this. And I put her in charge of my access control group.
Nice.
And now she, runs a large security department at Standard Chartered Bank. So, when people have that raw talent and you see that and you give them the opportunity and the support, they will just take off. So yes, we look for technical skills, for certain types of things. But on the other hand, it's also very important to make room for people who haven't come up in the usual way. I mean, I'm a liberal arts college dropout. I didn't have any computer classes. So you just never know who's going to be a really good security person, and you got to keep your mind open and look for them.
Yeah, I'll touch on that too.
Sure.
So I'm a huge fan of career development for people because, like most of us, we didn't really have bosses that did career development for us. So we want to make the next generation better. So constant feedback, and ask them what they want to do, because yes, they have to get their job done, but everyone wants to get better. Most people want to get better. Some just want to sit there, and those are the ones that you have to manage. But most people, finding out what their strengths are. We've run a campaign, the last two organizations that I've been at, called Strengths Finder 2.0. And it's a phenomenal assessment, a half-hour assessment. And it tells you the 5 greatest strengths of that person. So what you do is you leverage those strengths rather than focus on all their weaknesses, because they're weak at those skills because they don't like to do them, usually. So I've matrixed entire organizations, and when a project comes up, you look at who is the futuristic thinker. Oh, it's Rob. Let's give that task to Rob. Oh, it's Sandy. Sandy's a developer, so she wants to do that kind of development work. Give her a pet project to work on this development project, or make her the lead on the project and let her shine. So I meet with my team often, every couple of weeks, about particular things that they're working on. Do they like it? What's good? What's bad? And every quarter, we sit down with their IDP and we review their mentoring tasks, their technical assignments, their learning. We do this thing called learning every day. So I tell them every day, go online, learn something. Share it with your team. Share it with me. Because if you're not learning, we're going the other direction. So I'm a big proponent of learning and leveraging their skills rather than bringing up all their weaknesses.
I'm writing that down. Every day, go online, learn something. I think that's cool. Share it with your team.
And I would like to add to that, just, what's key is, you have to do it for both. From the top down, you have to hit from the bottom up also. So like for myself, when I first went to Diebold, I have probably over 100 employees, about 65 are core cybersecurity people, right? And I made it, I scheduled a lunch with every one of my employees, do one-on-ones, right? Everyone to kind of let them know kind of what I felt, a little bit input from them, so that at least they knew that I was interested. And then with my direct reports, I kind of said, okay, I need to mentor these guys, but not necessarily me, because they might not be honest, right? I'm the boss, they won't tell me everything. And it's funny because I have Chris is on here, and I had Chris mentor one of my direct reports. So I set them up with people where I felt they needed some strengths and some of just peers that I work with, and pair them up and just ongoing mentoring or what have you. And it's totally to whatever level they want to take it, right? So if I seen an individual, actually one of my direct reports, his nickname's Negan, so for those of you who watch Walking Dead, because he's that type of individual, right? So I said, hey, you need to kind of balance yourself out. So I paired him up with a CISO that's, you know, that can kind of round them out in that way. So I think from the bottom up and from the top down, right? So I focused on my direct reports and talked to each one of my associates directly.
So going back to something Wendy said about the liberal arts studies, I majored in English, minored in communication, said I'd never sell anything, never work in technology. So I don't know how I got here, but you know, when you think about that, there's a three-part question that I'm going to ask, and then I'm going to let you guys go to it. Number one is, what are the core technical skills that you think, and I know this is a really broad thing, but we're talking about information security and cybersecurity data protection here. What are some of the core technical skills that you look for in people? What do you think are the most valuable industry certifications? And then my last question is, what's a college degree worth today? So let's actually start a little bit backwards here. What certifications what technical skills and certifications do you guys think are most important, just generally from a cybersecurity perspective? There's some people out here that maybe don't have any certs and want to go get certs, or maybe need to develop new skills and are trying to move into that. What advice would you give on that? Jeff Riva, can you start that?
I was just going to say, so certs are very different. CISP is all about knowledge, right? Do you know how to answer the questions across all the domains? If you look at SANS or the other technical certs, those are helping you build skills. I would say knowledge you can acquire much more easily than you can skills. Get the skills. If you have to choose between getting skills and getting a degree, get the skills. Absolutely.
Thanks. Good.
Not saying don't go to school.
That's a drop out.
Stay in school, all that.
That's right. Yeah,
I would say the number one cert or skill set is ethical hacking, because if you know how to break it, you know how to defend it. I could care less if you have a degree or you have a master's degree. I've got all waves on my small team, and they're both very good at what they do. Recently, we made a change to say, people on my team, you don't need a degree, which was very hard to do at the county at this particular level. But I showed them that there's a person on the team that doesn't have a degree but has 8 years experience, and he's just as good as or better with the guy with an advanced degree in his role. So to me, experience and technical skills from how to break things, because then you learn how to fix them.
Can you teach someone to be a hacker? Sorry, that's a philosophical question. Never mind. Don't answer that.
Okay, so I'm going to disagree with just about everything. Like I said, was a liberal arts major. I dropped out. I had a CISSP once. I let it lapse. I went through the same thing when I worked for the state of Texas, convincing them that I did not need to hire somebody who had a college degree if I could prove through a hiring matrix that they had the type of skills I was looking for. I did hire a lot of former system administrators, because I believe that you need to understand how something works in order to be able to secure it. I don't agree that if you know how to break it, you know how to fix it, because I know a lot of really useless breakers who are like, how can you not have this patched? And they have never worked in the real world and seen all of the different jury-rigged systems that we have to deal with every day. So building is very, very hard to do. That's a real talent that we have to look for. But also being, pragmatic, and as I mentioned, empathy. So now in terms of what Duo is looking for, that's probably up to the hiring managers. I don't have much visibility into that yet. But I would say get a good mix of hands-on work, building something, fixing something, running something, responding to things. The longer you do things, the more things break and you have to fix them, the more you learn about how they work. So just having that experience under your belt. If you're a student right now, if you can get internships, and I understand that unpaid internships are only for people who don't need money, so that's a very limiting factor. But see if you can volunteer in places, even volunteering for conferences like this, where you're helping to run operations. That all looks good on a resume, where you've gone out and tried to help people.
Thank you. Martin.
Just like that, I think everybody's correct here. And, when you think of security, it depends on how you define it. So you have your governance, risk, and compliance, right? And that stuff, you have to be really tuned to the business. You have like strategy and architecture. That's where you have to build things, right? And then your operations teams are going to focus on more technical skills, right? So it's a mix of everything. It depends on how your security organization looks like. I think from a college degree perspective, because it's difficult to get good talent and because of the lack of individuals, your organization adjust requirements. For us right now, it used to be 4-year degree. We're really laxed on that now, right? Because there's a need and there's a demand and there isn't capacity out there right now.
I think it's interesting. An observation that I would have is that I think that we've done two things. We've said that we'll hire people now, at least from what we do, we'll say that we'll hire people now that don't have a 4-year degree. We also know from statistically in the marketplace, just a college degree doesn't matter in a lot of industries now. You have to get an advanced degree if you want to teach. You have to get an advanced degree if you want to, many things require an advanced degree if you take that route. And I'm certainly not advocating for one way or the other. I'm just saying that there are many paths or something like that. I'm sorry, I was trying to sound wise.
Yeah. If I could jump in on this.
Yeah, please.
So a lot of different skills needed in a lot of different roles. Don't be generic. Don't try to have a little bit of every skill. I would say all interviews come down to one question. What can you contribute?
Yeah.
And the answer to that is based on what your strengths are and what your passion is. You only have to be good at the things that you have strengths in, and there will be a role for that, right? Teams need to have a variety of skill sets. So don't try to have a little bit of every skill set, but just know what it is that you want to do as your contribution. And then when you interview, make sure you're also interviewing your boss and that you have a boss that's going to continue to make your role bigger so that you don't outgrow it, right? You should interview them as well and make sure that as you continue to advance your skills, it's still going to be a challenge for you and it's still going to be interesting and motivating.
Thanks, Jeff. So I'm going to ask one more question here, and then I'm going to on before you get a job, and then I'll talk a little bit about employee development, skills training, and stuff like that. But what do you look for in a resume? Like, what are the things that stand out to you in a resume? What are do's? What are don'ts? Are there anything that if you see a resume and you're like, oh man, I'm not going to hire that guy, or you see a resume and you're like, perfect, I'm bringing her in right now and I'm going to hire her right away? Anything jump out at you like that?
Spelling.
Yeah,
That's for sure. That's a plus.
If you don't know how to spell the name of your company, I'm not going to hire you. Promise.
If you call yourself a thought leader, no, don't. Anything that you that is generally a compliment that you would say about somebody else, if you try to say it about yourself, it just comes out completely wrong. And so, yeah, if you lay claim to a lot of buzzwords, I don't think you're going to have the temperament.
A good friend of mine in Atlanta has it's a cybersecurity bingo that he has. You know this guy I'm talking about, but. If you say cloud, if you say best practice, if you say thought leadership, yeah, he pretty much, you say 5 of those things in a row, he says bingo and pushes the eject button and you fly out the window. What else, guys?
Yeah, I was just going to say that it has to be completely error-free, because in security, you have to be right 100% of the time. 100% of the time. I mean, you have layers, most people, so you have layers of defense and people can catch it if you're not 100% of the time, because there's human error, right? But in your resume, you're in complete control of that. That should be locked down 100% with the right skill sets that you can actually do. There's been lots of resumes that you can tell within 5 minutes of a conversation that they're lying. Don't lie. I mean, if you're not ready for that job, don't put it on a resume, because the person interviewing you will know in 5 minutes.
Yeah, and before Martin jumps in here, if you don't have good written communication skills and I ask you for a sample of writing, don't lie to me because I'll figure it out. But at least have some. If you know I'm a stickler for stuff like that, and I think every employer to some extent is. But if I'm a stickler for something like that. Have somebody look at your work. Have somebody else look at your resume. Sometimes you have this. I can't spell the word separate. There are these things that are little glitches in our minds. If you have something like that, I always have people look at my documentation. Not because I'm a great writer, but one of the reasons I have people look at my documentation is I have those little glitches, little quirks that I always make, and I can't recognize them in myself. Have somebody check your work. Anyway, go ahead.
I'd say, just to go on that, I have a neat little tool, Grammarly, right? It embeds right in the Outlook and everything. So it's kind of another tool that kind of takes over for spelling, but checks grammar and everything, gives you different suggestions. I'd say take a look at it. I purchased it for my son. He's in college. I said, hey, this is a great tool. Now that he has a license, I use it on my laptop, so it helps. But if you look at the resume thing, I think if you're putting down these achievements, right? I look to see if you know what value the business received from those achievements, right? So if you know why you implemented in, let's say, some system or something, what was the accomplishment, what value the business got back, and if you illustrate why you did this and this is the return that the business got on it, that helps, right? And specific roles, right, for managers and things, those are the things I look for. I think from a technical perspective, one of the probably most creative thing I've seen is we were looking for a security operations center analyst, and he wrote that he automated himself out of a job, right? That he created all these scripts and did all this stuff, and that was real creative. It kind of stuck out, right? And so those are the combination of things, right? So it really depends on the job, right? If you're looking for technical things, technical role, those things would stick out, right? But I would tell you, you're going to have different versions of your resume for different jobs, right? You're not just going to have one resume you're going to apply for every job for, because you can't illustrate all the success that you've had over your career, right? So you're going to, certain things for certain roles, you're going to tie up those accomplishments in that version of the resume for that position, and you have a spin off of that. I'm not going to say it's totally different. There's certain things you want to point out for each position that will directly relate, to that job you're applying for.
Cool, thanks.
Yes. So one other thing that I look for is leadership in your resume. Did you go above and beyond what you would normally be expected to do? Did you volunteer for your church? Did you volunteer for your neighborhood? Are you the subdivision chair or whatever? You can still talk about those things. To me, those are important because it's about character. It's about helping people, and that's kind of the business that we're in. We're in there to help people.
Great, thanks, Chris.
Another important tip is that tailor your resume to the job that you're applying for. One of these reasons is that, especially in security, because requirements are still very non-standardized, when I would have to hire, and people would sue the state for any reason if they were not hired for something, I had to be very careful and very literal in writing down what I was looking for, and if they didn't have the exact same words on the resume that match what I have, in other words, if I said I needed somebody who, had Linux experience, and they wrote down that they had Ubuntu experience, I would have to explain to the HR person, no, really, it's the same thing. So it's really better if somebody says, 5 years of this experience, and you've got that, write down 5 years of that experience, because it makes it easier for me as when I'm reviewing resumes to be able to say, yep, check, 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 instead of having to interpret it. Anytime you have to start interpreting a resume, you get into this gray area where you may have to defend your hiring choice later.
Yeah, thank you. We're gonna move into a little different category. We're going to talk about skills development. Before I go on, are there any questions from the audience? Do you have any questions for our panel? So think about that, and if you have something, raise your hand, and I'll call on you. I promise I'll look up once in a while. So my next skills development thing. First, we're going to talk. We're at a conference right now. So what are the best meetups, conferences, clubs,
this
organizations? Perfect. What are some of those best things to attend? ConVerge, obviously.
I found the capture the flag for the technical folks are awesome because you can make your own team or you can sit by yourself and it's you against your adversaries. You get a chance to play around with different technology and you can basically learn from everybody else around you. Typically people are friendly. I know they're competitive, but in a friendly spirit. I'm not sure how the one is going here, but the ones I've been involved in over the last 3 or 4 years, I've learned probably more by the guy sitting next to me than I have the whole year of studying up different technology. Also, networking events. I probably get the most benefit in the hallway at these events because of all the people that I get a chance to talk to. How are you doing this? Who are you using for this practice? How did it turn out? I mean, that could save me 6 months of time to know don't use vendor B, but go with A because of whatever they're doing for me. And as a CISO, as any position, right, your time is scarce, and you want to come to market with whatever product you're looking to get as soon as possible.
So what about MySec B-Sides, GERCON, DerbyCon, BurCon, DEF CON, Black Hat, ISACA, ISSA, like, there's an alphabet soup of that. Jeff, what do you think about stuff like that?
Anything that's going to be hands-on, anything that's going to be technical, anything that's got you writing notes and command line switches before they flip to the next slide because you don't want to wait until the slides are made available, any of that stuff is good. If it feeds your passion and it makes you more effective at what you want to do and helps you benchmark against others that are leaders in the field, those are great events to be at.
Jeff's one of the only people that I know that actually carries a notebook with him and writes notes on things. I can tell when you're engaged because you're writing notes. Martin, you got anything? Any conferences? Anything on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think those are all good ones, right? And I would even say, if you're wanting to learn, my youngest son, he's probably the most tech savvy kid that I have, right? And he likes to self-learn. So he goes out on YouTube and he looks at the videos and does stuff. I mean, he's learned to program on his own, right? And that's the kind of drive that you look for from individuals. That if there's this curiosity, he's like he's a sponge. And if he has any questions, he just searches on his own, right? And if he finds the answer on his own, he's going to retain it, right? It's a lot easier to, if somebody tells him the answer, he's more likely to forget it. So I think everyone has a different element to them, right? And how they learn it. I mean, but to answer your question, I think all those events are good. You need to kind of build relationships. And I would say even the physical ones, right? And I would say even online. And I gave one of my analysts, he was asking me my opinion. I said, I learned on IRC, right? I went out on IRC. I said, go back out there. I said, watch out. They're going to port scan you. They're going to probably bombard you. And then, I said, you ever heard of Tor? I said, go out on the Tor networks, right? And kind of learn, because he's interested in Intel and some other things. I said, you got to go out in the dark web. You got to get some mud on you have to go out in those areas where those people are, kind of learn. So just be careful though, right?
It's a great segue into skills development. What are you guys reading? Where do you ask people to go? Where do you suggest people go? And maybe Wendy, you can start that one. What do you read? Blogs that you read, stuff that you watch. How are you learning nowadays? And how do you suggest other people learn?
It really depends. Honestly, most time I spend on Twitter because that's where I get my news. I mean, I'm seeing stuff, before it goes to the regular sites and that sort of thing. I guess because security is so wide and varied and there's so many different cultures, I would just encourage you to dip into different ones. If you go to an InfraGard meeting, you're going to meet all the people with the short and tight haircuts. It's going to be a very different culture, and you're going to learn some very interesting and important things that you would not learn going to, DEF CON or ShmooCon. So, if you talk to retailers, you're going to see a very different culture. If you talk to people in healthcare education, if you talk to people in policy and privacy work, you're going to learn a lot of different things. So, just vary it up. I can't, if you start with the very well-known news blogs, like blogs by like Brian Krebs and so on, start following what they link to and then just start, surfing and see what you read. Whether you like things that are about narratives, that are about issues, whether you like really technical stuff, whether you like places where you can just download stuff, not Pastebin, but whether you really like, tool archives where you can go play with them, just kind of surf around.
Yeah. So if you weren't in the panel yesterday, if you didn't sit in on the panel yesterday, one of the things that I said is I'm connected to Martin on LinkedIn. One of the things that I do, he gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning and he reads news. So I don't get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, I get up at 5. And so at 5 o'clock in the morning, I jump on LinkedIn. I'm like, hey, what's Martin reading today? And then I follow that rabbit, it's kind of a rabbit hole. So I follow that till I have to go to work. And so sometimes when I'm driving. But anyway, go ahead. Chris?
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're not following Martin, connect with him. He's a good source. I use the site Dark Reading. It's pretty interesting. It's varied subjects. It could be what's the attacks, what's the policy changes. It's pretty up to date. I haven't found any rogue information on there, but it's information that I use to summarize and then advise my boss and the county executives about potential things that are happening in the industry or in other industries that we should be aware of. Recent events from the news, definitely, I'll tell you an example. There was a hack in December of LA County, and it affected 750,000 records. So I did a quick analysis to say, if this happened at Oakland County, what would our impact be? And I analyzed that against our cyber insurance policy and said, if this were to happen to us based on our current controls, it would cost us $10 million out of pocket today. What do? We upped our insurance policy 2 months later. So it's using current events in the news to help analyze your position to put you in a more risk-adverse spot. So it's stuff that we do every day. And the only reason we did that was because we were watching the feeds. This happened to our neighbor. Let's make sure it doesn't happen to us.
That's a really cool idea, and I think for those of us that aren't CISOs, that's something that maybe if we were to do that first, if one of your employees had brought that to you as a side project, if they would have said, "Hey, I just saw this this breach, this vulnerability, or whatever," and they said, "This is what I think the financial impact would be to us," would that be something you would reward and think was great?
That's exactly what we want them to do.
Yeah.
Analyze, provide a recommendation.
Yeah. Good.
Don't give me the problem. Give me a solution to what the problem could happen.
Sure, Jeff.
I think going on the original question, Twitter, that may be more a generational thing. You know, we did a lot of interviews over the last couple. I've based on the experience of a lot of interviews over the past couple of years that we did, what I found is a lot of, because we always ask people, well, what do you read to stay current? And I'm very, very surprised at the range of choices, but it seems like a lot of kids are getting good stuff off of Reddit. We have threat intel feeds, so that's where I get most of my information, other than Krebs, of course, but Reddit seems to be very popular, very approachable, and yeah, a good source to start with.
Cool, thanks. Martin, saved you for last because I stalk you on Google, on LinkedIn all the time.
And I said this yesterday, right? There's two streams I follow. Now, I mean, one is for the executives, right? So like for those of you that are aware, there's an attack going on the last 10 hours, about 45,000, 74 countries, about 450,000 ransomware attack. I think I was just reading. Is it? So it's so that is something from CNN or ABC News or something, Wall Street Journal, something. I would take that, forward it to executives, let them know, make sure our team is looking at it, whatever. But I want to give them a credible source, right? Because that's what they're looking at. For me, for all the techie stuff, it's like the Hacker News. Another good one's Register. The Register, it's UK. Yeah. They have some really good stuff. And I just follow a lot of different things. Get them in all different kind of feeds, even Twitter. I subscribe to some of the dumps, right, from everything that gets dumped over on Pastebin and everything else. My team looks at that, makes sure that there's no credentials that are relating to our organization that were in that dump. So a lot of good feeds, a lot of good sources out there. I mean, I think you got to kind of pick and choose, but make sure the source that if you're going to forward it on and communicate, right, again, know your audience. So the executives, I give them a credible source, something that they look at for other news, right? For my staff, there's other stuff that we look at.
Thanks, Martin. Hey, sticking with you for a second. I'm going to go to rewarding. I'm 6 minutes till the end here. From a compensation perspective, what are some tips when you're asking for a promotion or a pay increase? And then on the flip side of that, yeah, hopefully none of your employees ever watch this, right? Just kidding. On the flip side of that, how can you proactively reward employees so that you're having that conversation faster?
It's really good, you know, and I think it goes back to what Chris is saying is this career development path is you have to sit down and they have to know up front kind of what your plan is, and you want to know some input from them, what their expectation is, right? What do they want to do? That in itself is also rewarding to individuals. The compensation wise, from, you know, when you're talking about salary, I mean, that gets a little difficult, right? Because people jump around, right? They're taking these bumps. And the one thing that we notice is I'm going to look at your resume, and if you've been short-lived in all these different jobs, I'm not going to hire you, to be honest with you, because I can't put the time and money to invest in using you if you're only going to be here 6, 8, 1 year, months or a year. But I could tell you that if money is an issue, I would say be upfront and honest. I just had an individual that was telling me, came to me, it kind of came up to me, and it was about, he felt he was being micromanaged, right? And I felt it was kind of concerning and stuff, so I kind of sat down with one of my direct reports. We talked to the manager, said, hey, just be a little bit more creative, kind of give some guidance. A week later, that person came up and said, hey, they got a job offer, it's 20% bump in pay, da-da-da. I was so pissed off. I said, listen, if this was what you really wanted, you should have told me this first, because I just spent a ton of cycles, kind of working with my manager, doing all this other stuff, right? So if it's money, just be upfront, right? But I would say, don't think because you did one task or one good thing, it's worth, right, a raise. It isn't, right? We're looking for longevity, and I know it's a little difficult, so we try to provide diversity, right? Because people are going to get bored. Like I got 18 people that sit in the security operations center, eyes on glass, right? You're going to get bored of that in a year, right? So we take certain individuals, we rotate them out in different areas. Depending on how big the organization is, what opportunities there are, but we try to rotate people around, give them some diversity. But again, just be honest, right? And I would say do some diligence. Don't go look at some of these other things on the internet to see, what the salaries are, because that's you guys saying what your salary is, and a lot of people just inflate that number to kind of say, look, I'm worth 60,000 or 80,000. Well, find out what the reality is, because when we go to comp, they pay for services and they get the real compensation in the market in the area, right? So don't compare yourself to somebody in New York or LA, right? Take it for your region.
Thanks. There's a question from the audience or a comment? Thanks. So for the audio, thanks, Brian. What are some of the lessons as managers that you've learned in terms of retention, and what are some of the failures and successes you've had when retaining employees? The comment was that many times employees leave jobs because of their managers, not because of their team members. They love their team members, but they got a manager they just can't live with. Sorry, go ahead.
There's this great Japanese proverb: "He works for you, you work for him." And that's just the way that I approach management. When you invite someone onto your team, you're inviting them to be, you're part of their journey over their career. So from a motivation perspective, I try to stay very engaged. I do one-on-ones regularly with my direct reports, but I also do skip level meetings, every single month. And those skip level meetings, I'm not going to micromanage the manager who has the direct reporting relationship, but I want to know what their career goals are and just kind of get the temperature of their engagement. I was horrible as a manager in my first time out, and I made it a point to focus on those things that I wasn't doing and start doing them. And if you have care for your team and you care about, that person within your organization growing and having a chance to contribute and always being challenged, that helps a lot. And, we got to work with HR to get their levels up, because they're under pressure to keep the levels down. But, you watch your team members grow out of their roles, and it starts to get a little bit easier, because now they're starting to get into different levels. But it's very much mindfulness about your team and having some care about what their strengths are and what their aspirations are, and just staying in tune. And that's what I didn't do when I started. And when you interview, make sure that you're getting this feedback from whoever you're interviewing with. Know that boss that you're going to sign up with, because you're going to be with them for a while, make sure they're actually good.
That's great. Thanks, Jeff. Chris?
I was going to say, having a two-way feedback is the most important thing, because I've left bosses that I didn't like, and I didn't like because it was the boss. But if you're open and honest, one nice thing you could do, if you can't change the compensation, you can put them on a particular project. You can say, what are you most interested in? Oh, we can pair you up with the telecom team to work on this new UCC project where you're going to spend 20% of your time doing X. Giving them something to do that they're really interested in helps them stay motivated. And then being honest to say, I'm stuck. This is your salary. I want to grow you, but I can't grow you in the pocketbook. Let's grow you in other ways. And ask them how you want to grow. And if you actually listen and do what they have asked, then your relationship is just that much stronger.
Thanks, Wendy.
A couple things. We talked earlier about, you working and sharing your knowledge so that you're not the only one who holds a particular type of expertise. If you can't be replaced, then you also cannot be promoted. So it's very important to, if you can, work yourself out of your current position and take on, as many and come up with new things that you can do and suggest that you be allowed to do them, because that's how you work yourself into another position. A lot of times you have to prove that you're already doing the job in order to get that job. It's not that you can say, oh, now I want to go, do this other completely different thing. And they say, okay, and they send you over there. You need to be able to prove that you're doing it. The one thing that I've seen, particularly from older employees, is the attitude of, well, I've been here the longest, therefore I deserve the promotion. And it's like, no, you're not actually that good at your job. So no. That's a really difficult conversation to have, and it's to be honest, it's not one that I've been very good at so far. But it's as mentioned, there are different ways to grow in your job. But sometimes your manager's hands are tied. I would say the most valuable things that a manager ever did for me are, one, to tell me keep me up to date on what they were working on, what was going on their level, so I could understand the lay of the land at their position, and also to tell me what I still needed to learn. What their estimations of growth areas for me were. So one of them said to me, you need more experience in budget management. So he put me on that. So there are many different ways to grow, and again, you just have to have a good discussion with your manager. But it may be that your manager says, I'm sorry, my hands are tied. In my estimation, you haven't proven that you can do the other job that you want. But if the manager's a good one, they'll say, well, let me help you try to find another place where you can be successful at that, if that's what you really want to do.
Thanks, Wendy. So we've got just 2 minutes left for the panel here. So I want to quickly go. Wendy, you can start. Last words or how do the most successful technical resources build their skills? You can wrap that together with saying bye to our friendly audience.
Bye. As I was saying to somebody earlier, another important thing is don't be honest and be transparent, but don't sell yourself short. I know a lot of people, both women and men, who, say, oh, I'm only a junior in this, or, I'm just learning this. Lay out your skills as objectively as you can, and let the employer decide whether that's junior or senior. Talk about what you're interested in. They may say, well, I can bring you in as a junior, but, you have senior, capabilities in these areas, and you could probably grow into this in a couple of months. Just don't go in there saying, deciding that it keeps dying on me. Just don't decide for the employer what you can and can't do. Don't prejudge or predetermine the outcome before you go in for the interview. Just be really honest on what you know.
Cool. Chris, again, building business skills or last words.
Sure. So I would say practice. Whether you're talking to people, communication, although technology is really important, nothing happens without proper communication. In our game, you can be the technical wizard, but if you can't communicate why you want this done, it's never going to get done. So practice your communication, whether you're talking to the clerk at the grocery store or you're talking to the CEO. Have that 30-second conversation ready to go when the CEO sees you in the elevator and says, hey, I'm so-and-so, what do you do here? Have that prepared. The last thing you want to do is be, stuff, what my boss tells me. And you never know when that chance is going to happen. It could be in the parking lot. It could be at the grocery store. So be prepared and just keep talking.
Cool. Jeff?
To build business skills, I would say consume business writing that's done at a very high level. So Wall Street Journal, if you like that side of the aisle, The Economist or Financial Times, if you'd rather have a different perspective. But I mean, that's what the senior leaders in the organization are reading, and when you read what they read, you'll be able to relate to them.
Nice, like it.
And I'd just like to say thank you for letting us be a part of this panel. I mean, the resume is only 25% of the process. You know, the rest is networking. And, you know, for me, this was an interview, right? You got a chance to interview us, and we got a chance to see from your engagement, you know, and start that process. So
Thanks. Quickly, Martin.
Said quickly.
I had to
Brian, you're hired.
we handed you the mic, and I had to say quickly.
No, I mean, two things. I think really what's important for you guys is, I would say, know the business. Whatever organization you work in, I mean, you have to know what's the driver, right? How are you generating revenue, all the different things the company does, right? Because from a security perspective or IT or whatever, don't treat yourself as a cost center, right? You need to be part of the business. You need to engage and find out what each business function is doing. And you start with your peers at those levels, right? Understand those things, and it helps. And I think from an interview perspective, you know, be confident, but be respectful, right? I would say, because you don't want to be in there overconfident, but I would say don't be too humble or don't feel intimidated, right? Because you're selling yourself short, right? I mean, you want to be an equal player. So,
Thanks, Martin. Thank you all for attending. Martin, Jeff, Chris, Scott, just kidding, Chris and Wendy. Thank you guys for being on the panel. Guys, these guys are all hiring. If something they said is interesting, catch them in the hall. As you go out to the left here, we will be doing a drawing for a prize at the CBI booth, cbisecure.com. If you get a chance, stick around in here for user behavior analytics, I think, with Dan Gregory after this. And thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Thanks for your time.